Hi everyone, welcome to Gourmet Traveller Wine's inaugural virtual wine tasting. Thank you so much for joining us. I know there are people from all around the world who have managed to tune in tonight, which is great to see. We're delighted when Sam Neill decided to take us up with this offer. We think it's a pretty special way of kicking off our virtual wine tastings, and yeah, welcome. How have you been, Sam?
Good, and it's about a year since the last time we did a wine tasting here, which is just on the other side of the room. And perhaps there was 30 of us here, and we were eating and drinking and got very noisy and raucous and convivial, as wine tasting should. So it's a whole different world, isn't it?
Absolutely. How has life in isolation been treating you?
Well, it's been a mixed bag. Look, along with the rest of the world, I've been through moments of anxiety and so on. I'm very pleased to see results are coming in, at least on our side of the world, that what we went through, that's to say, putting ourselves into compounds, has actually worked, and there are now no active cases of New Zealand, thanks be, in New Zealand, and it looks like community transmission is almost down to zero in Australia. So that's been an enormous success, and I would like to think that leadership in the rest of the world is looking at us as an example of what is possible. Now we're in a sort of strange kind of limbo land. I don't quite know what happens next. None of us really do. I can't get back to my vineyard because there are quarantine restrictions. So at the moment I'm in this. I think I'm a person who likes to get things done. I'm sort of get strangely strange when I'm not actually doing something. And so I'm neither acting at the moment, nor am I involved on the farm or in the vineyard or in the winery. So the things that I'm used to doing, I don't have access to at the moment. So like a lot of people, I'm kind of betwixt and between, and who exactly knows what's going to happen next? We can't tell.
We've been keeping pretty busy on social media. I feel like I've come to know you pretty well over the past 3 months or thereabouts.
Yeah, well, that was. I have been a little more. I've always been quite fond of Twitter, not in a sort of Trumpian way, but I've always quite liked the idea of entertaining people a little bit, rather than shouting at people, and so Instagram and Twitter have sort of kept me a little bit busy over these few months, and I've sort of quite enjoyed that. And it meant making a fool of myself extensively, playing the ukulele badly, and rediscovering poetry. That's been a great thing, and just sort of. And it's been a sort of oddly rewarding experience because the feedback has been so touching. You know that. Maybe it's been of some comfort or a diversion for people that have otherwise been locked away and frightened and as I say, anxious and depressed. So.
Great. Well, thank you so much for all your efforts. And just one last question before we get stuck into the wine, which is of course the reason we're here.
Can't wait.
It's
wine time.
It definitely is. In
fact,
let's open the first one. So we're going to start with the 2018 Picnic Pinot Noir, which I believe everyone has. This is the first time I've tried this one, Sam. So I think you are. Oops.
Beautiful glasses.
You think they'd be wide enough for me to just pour straight into, but evidently not.
I think a good glass makes an enormous difference, don't you?
Absolutely.
I've been drinking out of $1.50 IKEA glasses in the last few months.
Oh, really? There you go.
And really, a great wine deserves a great glass. And
Well, cheers, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. So, Sam, tell us about the 2018 Pinot Noir.
well, I don't know. You give me a tasting.
Do I have to?
You can do the tasting notes. The Picnic, of course, is what we call our entry-level wine. We have 4. Oh, look, nice legs. You allowed to say that these days? Nice legs.
Yeah, I don't hear it very often, but
It's all right.
absolutely,
Yeah. These things. I remember saying, my father was. We were on holiday once, and it stuck with me. This comment. We were. Well, let me have a sip first, because everyone else is. We were away camping, and we were going fishing up in a very remote part of New Zealand. And we had to, there were gates, on a farm to get through to get up to the top of the river. My mother got out to do the gate, and my father said, I was 10 years old or something, my father said, she always had a great pair of legs, your mother. And I thought, strange thing to say, that's a great what is a great pair of legs? I don't get it. Anyway, 20 years later, I understood what he was talking about. But here's a great pair of several legs, good legs.
Plenty of legs, yeah.
But speaking of family, if you see the label there, that's my grandfather. He's a jolly chap, and the thing about me and wine is my family's been in wine and spirits since 1860. So, what's that? 160 years or something, is it? 100? You do the math. Come on, Don. It's early in the evening.
What year did you say?
But it might be 100. It might be 1830, 1860 at least.
There you go. Yes.
So his father founded Neill and Company in Dunedin, but they were wine and spirits merchants. So we and that's Sid Neill and that's probably about 1920. He's got a collar and tie. He's smoking a pipe, and he's wearing a Norfolk jacket and a flat cap, and that's what you used to wear on picnics in those days.
Well, there you go. Dress up.
You'd motor into the country,
yeah,
and preferably to a beach or up to the mountains, perhaps with a fly rod, and so that's Sid on there. Now, Two Paddocks has 4 vineyards, and this is a blend from all 4 of our vineyards. 4 vineyards scattered around Central Otago, and this is what I call everyday wine. You're lucky if you get to drink this every day, because it's much better than an everyday wine.
Absolutely.
It's just that I drink it every day, so I
Okay.
call it an everyday wine. But yeah, it's.
And so you
So
say.
tell me what you think. You're the taster now.
I think it's a delicious, and I know exactly what you mean when you say every day. I mean, it's not necessarily the most complex, but it's still an above average bottle of red wine. So if this is your everyday red wine, I'd be happy to drink this most days, I think. Going back to the 4 vineyards, you were talking about the fruit sourced from each of those vineyards. So are they certain blocks in those vineyards, or younger vines? Or?
These will tend to be the younger vines.
Okay.
And there are certain parts of the vineyard, for instance, there's a block called the Priscilla Block, which has never produced anything other than the picnic wine.
Okay.
Because it faces south, and that's probably what we think is the southernmost vineyard in the world.
Okay. Yep.
That's named after my mother. I planted it, a few weeks after she died.
Right.
And So there are certain parts of vineyards that are always designated for picnic, and we perhaps might allow a little more grape to stay on the vine.
Okay.
But I've never wanted to, or I believe have produced anything less than an excellent wine, and I'm happy to show that anywhere, particularly in august surroundings like Gourmet Traveller wine.
So Sam, going to Pinot Noir as a variety, how did you obviously got a dear love for it. How did it come about?
Well, it certainly wasn't from growing up, although I grew up in a family where there was obviously wine on the table all the time, because my parents loved wine, and we were in that business. But New Zealand wasn't a wine-producing, country in those days. No. It was, and Neill and Co had the distinction of having the highest-selling brandy in New Zealand.
Right.
It wasn't a terribly good brandy, I don't think. Okay. They still make it. I'm not a brandy connoisseur, but it's called Beehive Brandy.
And it's from New Zealand?
No. It's
right.
from France.
From France. Right.
They also had King George IV whiskey, and it was New Zealanders drank spirits and beer in those days.
Yeah.
So table wine was almost non-existent, except in homes like ours. And my father was also the French consul, and his father before. It was sort of like it was an inherited position.
Yeah. Right.
So we were very interested in France, and my father, grandfather, and great-grandfather all spoke very good French. They were always receiving French dignitaries in Dunedin and so on. My great-grandfather's house had a very steep bank outside the front door, and famously, the French ambassador fell backwards in a backward roll all the way down to the front lawn, having had a little bit too much Bordeaux. But Bordeaux was really what interested my father, and I'd never heard of Pinot Noir. I knew nothing really of great Pinots until such time as I got to go to France and go to Europe and work as an actor.
Right, yeah.
And that's when I became sort of fascinated by it. And the very first great bottle of Burgundy that I ever opened, that I ever had the privilege of sharing, was with my friend James Mason. It's a story that I've told many times. But James and his wife, they took me to Charlie Chaplin's favorite restaurant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he said, we're going to drink something very good tonight. And I'd love to know what that, it was probably, I don't know, it was, I absolutely, but it was a sort of, it was one of those wake-up things that happened to you in your life.
Yeah.
This extraordinary bottle of wine was poured, and I said, I don't know what this is, but I've never drunk anything so beautiful in my life. What is it? And he said, this is Burgundy, don't forget it. So when I got to London, I started to earn, I left New Zealand on $5,000 a year. I got to England, and I was earning a little bit more money than that, and Burgundy was affordable then too.
Yeah.
So I could go down to, I had a favourite wine shop on the Edgware Road, and I said, look, I'm really interested in this stuff called Burgundy. And they started to introduce me to it. There's one fruit fly there that I blame you for, Don. And they started introducing me to red Burgundies and white Burgundies. And you could get a really good Premier Cru or Grand Cru for, 30 quid. Yeah. So those were the days. And I got really really, really fascinated by Pinot. I just thought it was the most magical for, or, you know, I was also, you know, having a look at Côte de Rhônes and Bordeaux and so on, but it was Pinot that really grabbed me, and I kept going back to it, and then subsequently I will get that fly. It's not on camera, is it?
No, it keeps making an appearance.
But the thing about those little flies is one little fly gets in your drink, minuscule, you can hardly see it, and it ruins the whole glass.
And these aren't exactly the right glasses to be able to fish it out of either.
No, they're not. I'll do that, actually.
Okay.
Great.
I'll aim for it next time.
Isn't it great how it's beginning to open up now? And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's funny. I mean, I haven't personally drunk a whole lot of Burgundy. Well, I've had bits and pieces, but I just find Pinot is such a. It's kind of a bit of an epiphany wine almost. I mean, I always have these. I find it sort of transcends any ordinary experience you might have with any other wine. Whether you know, it doesn't usually matter what kind of grape variety. It's maybe Nebbiolo or something like that is you know on par.
Yeah.
But for instance, the other night we'd put the baby to bed and cooking some dinner and threw on the latest Neill and Liam Finn album and opened a bottle of Martinborough Pinot Noir.
Yes.
And it's just like this all-encompassing experience.
Right.
And there's just and literally just smelling the wine, I think, I don't know, it's just kind of, it's sort of,
It's a whole
it's
New
pretty
Zealand
special.
experience right there.
yeah, exactly. And sort of sitting there stroking a kiwi fruit just to give it some texture. But no, I think it's.
What were you eating?
I can't remember what I was eating now.
Yeah, but the great thing about Pinot Noir is it's such a flexible wine that you can drink it with.
It really is.
Successfully with even fish. And it's quite happy to assist the process.
Yeah, salmon particularly is such a good match. I think we need to go for some questions if there are any hanging around.
Yeah.
We'll try and move on to the next wine shortly if we can. Thank you.
By the way, this is traditional, the way we're tasting these wines. We've got Picnic, the Estate Pinot Noir, and then one of my single vineyards.
Yeah.
And I always wonder why we do this, because actually we should probably start at the greatest wine first.
Big guns first.
And big guns first, and then work your way down, because at any dinner party, I reckon that's the way to go, is actually serve the top wine first, because by the time things are really going, nobody notices what they're drinking.
It's a good point. It's a very good point. I'm sorry we didn't do that.
But that first bottle, if it's something really good, it's extraordinary and unforgettable.
You kind of need it to be the first wine of the night, really, don't you? The special wine has to be perfectly served.
That's the one that people are going to go home and remember.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're perfectly happy with the Picnic, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, we are, darling. Okay, come on, let's have a question.
All right. So, question from Paula. Do you know where your vines are originally from?
Where are my vines originally from? Well, of course, they originate in Burgundy, both literally and figuratively. So, Pinot was developed in the Burgundy region. It actually means black. Pinot grapes.
It's like a pine shape.
You know, you see those great big grapes that look like that. They're actually more like a pine cone.
Yeah.
And one of the frustrating things about Pinot is that you have to have a very low yielding vine. That not only do you keep the number of bunches down to an absolute minimum on a vine, they're very small bunches too. So a great Pinot Noir vine produces very little wine.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why a great bottle of Pinot is actually a little bit more expensive than others.
Of course, because there's less of it, really.
Anyway, so where do these vines come from? They're all what are known as Dijon clones. So they've been, it's plant material from that's been taken from various parts of Burgundy and developed into a clone. It's not. It sounds sort of rather cold and scientific, but actually, there are certain clones that we've grown to love, like we do our children.
Yeah.
In particular, for me, clone 5, and when we get to the first paddock, that is almost that is all clone 5.
Okay.
So and certain clones work magically with certain little areas of your vineyards, and now we planted in 1993, so our wines, our vines are mature, and it's fascinating to learn about all our vineyards are very small, but the little areas within those small vineyards are in themselves fascinating, and you know, the 116 is magic here, but not in that corner of the vineyard, you know.
Absolutely, and you know, do you think there'll ever be a single block wine? Do you have particular parcels of fruit that are more
well,
special
this
than
is
others?
always a single block,
Okay.
and in fact, it's a doomed part because now we have phylloxera
Right.
in Central Otago. Now, luckily, 3 of my vineyards we planted on rootstock, which means they are resistant to phylloxera.
Yeah.
That first vineyard, the first paddock, we planted on its own roots, and wouldn't you know it, the phylloxera started in that first 20 rows up in that corner, and it started right in the middle there and spread out. And we're sadly having to replace, and we replace about 5 rows a year.
Wow.
From those old vines that we just loved and always, in a great year, really sang.
So you're pulling out the roots, the original roots,
Yeah, that
and
always has to
replanting
go.
with because they feed on the roots, obviously.
But we're
don't they?
replanting with clone 5 on
Excellent.
rootstock.
Oh, good to know. All right, well, we might move on to the next wine. So we're not going to go straight to the top just yet. Go for the,
But this is our flagship, so.
of course. Now, was this the wine that was featured in Killing Eve? Do you know?
Yes, I believe it was. Yeah, and I'm very happy to see it there. It was a quality show, quality wine, and a quality show.
It was a good show. We actually just finished watching it. It's
Yeah,
really good.
yeah. So this is unusual in that our 2 Paddocks Pinot Noir, our estate wine, is always a blend from all 4 of our vineyards.
Yeah.
And this is the only year that all. But part of the reason for planting 4 different vineyards in 4 different areas was a sort of insurance thing, because you know, growing Pinot, in order to grow great Pinot, you have to grow your wine in a scary marginal area. That's to say, you know, it has to be cool climate, and cool climates are very scary because you are very prone to frost in the spring and the autumn. Anything can happen. You're living on the edge. You're living on a knife edge. This year, the 2018, we had it was a very unusually hot year. Well, when we say hot, I don't mean by Australian standards. And I mean, it got up to 30 degrees.
Right.
That's really hot for us.
Yeah, yeah.
In around Christmas and through into January. And luckily, it cooled off, I think, in February and March. So what you want with Pinot is a very long growing season. You don't want your grapes to grow quickly. And I'm always amazed that when I go to South Australia or something, that they've finished they've finished harvest at the end of January or something, and we're just hanging on with our grim fingernails and hoping that we'll ripen. We've more than 1 year we've actually picked in the snow. So we're leaving this, but we're actually picked this, I think, 3 or 4 weeks before we might expect to otherwise. So all 4 vineyards produced beautiful wine that year, and that doesn't always happen. And this turns out to be about 25% roughly from all 4 of our vineyards.
That's a fairly ideal snapshot of 2 paddocks. Speaking of which, where did the name 2 paddocks come from? I mean, you've obviously got 4 vineyards.
Well, that was another accident. My friend Roger Donaldson, Australian New Zealand producer, director, who made my first film, which is called Sleeping Dogs. He and I bought and planted 2 little vineyards right next to each other in the Gippsland Valley, the first paddock.
Right.
And we thought we might do a little wine company between us. And we couldn't think of a name, and I said, well, look, I've got 2 paddocks. Let's just call it 2 paddocks. He said, that's good. Now, Roger got frosted 3 years in a row.
Was this in the beginning?
Yeah, right in the beginning.
Yeah.
So I decided to just go my own way, and I kept on with the name. And it's partly called that because, getting back to the Beehive Brandy that I spoke of before, my father used to say, do you know why Beehive Brandy is the best-selling brandy in New Zealand? And the wrong answer was, because it's the best, Dad. No. We don't pretend it's the best, but it's an unpretentious name, and New Zealanders are unabashed when they go into a bottle shop to buy Beehive. They don't have to say Courvoisier or something like that.
It's easy to get your
so 2 paddocks,
head around.
It's unpretentious, and it is what it is, except we're now obviously 4 paddocks. Well, a lot more than that, given that various vineyards are sort of separated into different blocks.
Great. Well, it's I mean, to me, this isn't typically Central Otago either. I'm sort of often, it's definitely got the structure, but not necessarily the weight. There's some sort of, I hate using this term, but kind of ethereality to it, in a way. And I'm just saying that
I think. Look, we've always been restrained. Central Otago did get a sort of name for a little bit for having making big fruit-forward wines, and I didn't particularly like those. I wanted my wines to be restrained and subtle, and I think that's really more the style, I suppose, that other Central Otago winemakers have come back to.
Yeah, of course, and it's really nice to see that. I think at the same time, when you started planting those first vines, that was more or less the very similar time to when the other pioneers of Central Otago were kind of getting.
Yeah, well, I was lucky because there were a few that went before me, Alan Brady and the Millses
of course.
over at and Tink Mills. They were great family friends. Their family were merchants also in Dunedin. That went Sargood and Co. They went back to the 1860s as well, and it was really, Rolf at Ripon planted everything.
Right.
Just to see what would work.
Yeah.
And obviously the Cab Sav was a catastrophe, and Shiraz hopeless.
Yeah.
But this Pinot that he was producing was really, really interesting. And I had lunch over at their place in the early 90s before I thought of doing it. And he opened a bottle of his latest Pinot. And I said, "This is really interesting, Rolf." He said, "I'm very, very pleased with this." And about a year later, I planted one of those 2 paddocks. Yeah.
There you go. Now, whose vineyard view do you prefer? Do you prefer the Ripon view, or do you prefer the 2 paddocks view? If you're looking out of your vineyards, they've got
they've
a remarkable site, don't they?
It is a remarkable site.
Yeah,
it's an iconic site, and every book on New Zealand wine always features that view. But I remember camping on those flats where the vines are now when I was a kid, you know.
Yeah.
And we'd go water skiing out on the lake in front.
Beautiful. Such a lovely part of the world.
Yeah. But it was my father who really. We used to go up to Central Otago every summer, and my father used to say, "I don't know why people aren't growing wine up here. It's perfect." And sadly, he died the year before I planted my first vines. That's just one of those things. You know?
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's kind of, you know, it's kind of quite fascinating that you had a fascination for Pinot Noir, but also obviously history in Central Otago at the same time. So was it sort of a no-brainer for you to kind of set up a vineyard there, or?
Well, it was. Look, I just thought, and Greg Hay and a few others said, but they said, "Do you want to come in on this, and we'll plant a vineyard for you. You work out what you want there," and all these sort of things came together. And then in 1997, I opened my first bottle from that vineyard. And that was a fatal mistake, because that bottle was really good. It was a really good bottle of wine. And I've never understood ambition. I mean, personal ambition.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't get it. But that was when I first began to gradually realize I was ambitious for something. And the thing I was ambitious for was, I realized I wanted to make the greatest Pinot Noir that ever there was. And if I just left it there, I probably would have, it would have been fine. You know, I would have had that nice hobby vineyard.
Yep.
But instead, Pinot and 2 paddocks has kind of consumed at least half of my life. It's become something that's endlessly fascinated. I learn more and more every year, and I'm more and more ambitious. Look, I think Burgundy is a really great example of the sort of I mean, we start there. All that we know and all that we grow is based on Burgundy, and we give thanks for that. But we're not hidebound by them. We don't pull our forelocks anymore. We are making great wines in our own right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think probably the first people that planted wine in Burgundy, which were probably the Romans, were a bit like me. You plant your vines, and you realize in 2,000 years' time, no one is going to remember who you were. In 50 years' time, no one will remember me, but they will remember my vineyards. And those vineyards will live on long after anything else that I've done.
It's a good legacy.
I reckon.
Thank you. Well, we probably should get to a couple more questions while we're here.
Questions?
Yes. Well, we've got one from a good friend of Gourmet Traveller Wine, Mitchell Taylor from Taylor's Wines, and he's asked...
I know Mitchell.
Yep. How did you go in the Bledisloe of wine? Do you think you'll take on Aussie again?
Mitchell, let's get the rugby back first. Who thought
a
of
good
this
point.
Bledisloe thing? Look, I think I actually think competitiveness is, although I talk about wanting to make the best wine that ever there was, I never see myself in competition with other winemakers, like Taylor's, for instance.
Yeah,
But I respect them, and I see us as being sort of fraternal or sisterial or something. What, you know, we're all paddling the same canoe, and I love cooperation between winemakers rather than competitiveness. So wine competitions are sort of good fun in it, but I mean they're silly, really. You know.
Naturally. There you go. Well, I mean, talking about Australia and New Zealand,
Yeah.
the wine styles we're famous for. Australia's famous for completely different styles.
That's
than
good,
New
isn't it? I
Zealand.
mean, that's complementary. You know, we
Yeah.
make very different wines. You know.
Absolutely. What other styles of wine do you enjoy drinking? I mean, I know you have Riesling as well under 2 Paddocks.
Yeah.
And then, as far as reds go, I assume you're, fairly well
I'm
versed.
I'm a pretty broad church when it comes to wines.
It's not a bad
Obviously,
way to be.
I'm completely consumed by Pinot, but I had a Sunday roast on Sunday, and I had a Yalumba signature.
Shiraz Cabernet.
Oh my God, and occasionally a bottle just stands up and goes, "Look at me,"
Yeah.
and aren't I something? And I saluted that wine. It was just absolutely
It's a great
magnificent.
wine. Do you remember what vintage it was?
I think it was. I should know this, but I think it was 15,
Okay. Yep.
and it was actually
great vintage.
great. And so I did plant Riesling, and I produce a small amount of Riesling every year. I think Riesling is the great unsung grape, and I always respect other Riesling drinkers because I think you're really onto something. I mean, and I love that people are rediscovering Chardonnay because I think Chardonnay is the other great white variety.
Yeah.
And I was baffled that it got unfashionable. But Riesling is known to the few, and there are some great Rieslings from Australia, which I absolutely adore. I always think that Riesling is kind of costs less than it's actually worth.
It's a great secret, I think, isn't it?
It's a
That's
great
what I always
secret.
kind of tell people.
Yeah, so don't tell people that it's too wonderful, otherwise it will get expensive.
We've been banging on about it for years, though. I feel if it was, if people were really going to jump onto it, then
I know, and I mean, look, a great Burgundy, without sort of blowing my own trumpet too much, I mean, this estate, 2 Paddocks, I think you have to spend about $300. I'm going to be a little controversial here, but I think to get that quality of a Pinot from Burgundy, you need to spend about $300.
or more.
Tell me I'm wrong, Dom.
Yeah, about that, probably
Okay.
more. I would argue, but it is a controversial statement, so I'm not going to even give it any light. Well, on the topic of Burgundy as well, can we talk about organics? I understand all your vineyards are certified
Yeah.
organic, so that's
Yeah.
through BioGrow
Yeah.
in New Zealand. When did you decide to
Well,
take
we've
that
been
process
in
on?
organics for many years now. Everything got certified by organic in 2018. The last vineyard that I actually acquired my last vineyard in 2014, which is called the Fusilier, and it's right next to Felton Road Vineyards, who are very well known. Now that was not organic, so we had to. It took 3 years or something like that to convert it to fully organic. So that held us back in terms of the other vineyards. But that first paddock, for instance, that was organic for about 5 years in the noughties. We had to go conventional for a couple of years, but I think since 2011, that's been fully organic, but now certified. It's really. Oh look, there's that fly. I told you to get that fly, Don, and you've done nothing about it.
I've definitely tried. You just haven't seen me do it.
Look, I talk about legacy. I want to leave my vineyards. I want to leave that land in better shape than I found it, and those first 3 vineyards were actually the only thing that had ever been done on them was people had grazed sheep on them, and I wanted. I want to make sure that I'm just interested in growing things and healthy places and healthy soil. Without healthy soil, I think we're doomed as a species.
Absolutely.
And spraying Roundup and all these terrible chemicals, you just realize you're killing stuff. Why would you want to drink a wine that a lot of the component is poison? Yeah. Really.
That's right. And I suppose, going back to the soil as well, without getting kind of too whimsical about it, we are, or you are, sort of custodian of the land.
Indeed.
And there's a responsibility, I think, to look after it for future generations. And it's nice to see that that is becoming a trend, or not a trend, but the thing to do. Now you see more and more, wine producers taking on that approach, and really kind of getting out there and paying attention to the soil health.
Yes, the soil health is everything. With no soil health, with that sterile soil that you get from spraying chemicals on things. Yeah. But someone explained to me once, there was a great quote. It was, when you're standing on your soil, you're actually standing on the roof of another world altogether. Absolutely. Because what's happening underneath you is so complex, all those microorganisms and so on that are work. And what we do at the farm is really, we're not just growing grapes. It's a sort of, everything is, I've just forgotten the word actually, but it's an all-inclusive thing. So I have cattle mainly because manure is absolutely vital, I think, for what we're doing. And someone maintains that Highland cattle produce the best manure. Okay. I'm not sure how this is possible, but they're very decorative as well. They have those big horns and they're sort of lovely, furry, shaggy things.
So you let your Highland cattle graze?
Oh no, they don't grow.
They don't. Okay.
But we carefully collect all their poo, and that goes into the preps and things that we use on the vines.
Right. And does that have you considered biodynamics? Is that a road you would go down at some point, do you think, or is it just a whole other world altogether?
Well, we actually used a few biodynamic techniques. Okay. But I'm not persuaded by the full moon stuff and burying a cow's horn and things. And Steiner himself wasn't a particularly well-known grape grower.
Okay.
Nor was he much of a farmer, as far as I can tell. But he had theories, and people adhered to them, and good for them. But I don't find that the arguments very compelling.
Okay. Well.
But a lot of our preps are actually sort of Steinerish preps.
Okay. Well, it's good to know. Do you feel it's imparted, some sort of quality, or helped with the quality of your wine?
I do. I think our wines are better for it. Yeah, I do.
Well, it's,
I mean, it's a very difficult thing to quantify because, with vine age, our vines, are more reliable, and we're smarter about our vineyards. We understand our land better. So our wines are always getting better.
Yeah.
And whether that's to do with organics, that's difficult to quantify. But I feel better about it. And I don't. I want my, the people that work with me to be healthy as well. And now we know that a lot of these things, they used to say, you can drink Roundup. Look, come on, matey, just, and then they die.
It's pretty
you
nasty,
don't want that.
isn't it?
You don't want that for your people.
Yeah. No, that's a very responsible approach, and kudos. Well, we might open the next wine. For those of you who have it, it's the 2017 first paddock, I think, isn't it? And take some questions at the same time.
Yeah.
So, Sam, this was the first vineyard you planted.
Yeah.
Is that?
So these vines go back to 93.
Now, 1993 was a pretty busy time for you.
93 was, that was...
work-wise.
Well, it wasn't the year we shot, but it was the year that we released the piano and Jurassic Park.
So how did you find time to plant a vineyard?
Yeah, well, I didn't actually plant the vines physically myself.
But that's okay.
Let's have a look at these, come on.
There you go. Sam's taking over now.
Okay. I'm going to do this quick answer thing. Should we open the Proprietor's Reserve tonight or cellar it for 5 years? That's a very tough one, Paul, because it's such a great wine and it's drinking well now. All three of my, Proprietor Reserves. We don't. We always release the last chance a year later because it's always a little shy. So the answer is either. But if you have a choice, if you have enough, and these are very rare wines. Bear in mind, there's only 120 cases made of these wines.
120, that's tiny.
So we're drinking it into extinction. But thank you for the question, Paul. If you have some spare, I would drink it now. Otherwise, cellar it for 5 years. We'd like to know why you didn't call your wine Jurassic Vines, from Fran Marshall. I'm going to let that through to the keeper, Fran. But thank you for the question. That'll be a really, really terrible idea. With respect. Do you source your wine barrels from France? Yes, we do. How many uses do you put them through? Andrew Maureen. Yes, all our oak barrels come from France, and we also use barriques to oak barriques from France to ferment the wine as well. How many uses do you put them through? Well, this is the extraordinary thing about. What does a barrel cost now? It's like $1,200 or something. They're really, really expensive, and they're really only good for 3 years, and then they're just planters.
Do you have a range of sizes with your
No, they're all
barrels?
the same.
They're all the same.
That standard barrel.
Yeah.
However, this last year we sent, I think, 70 barrels to Ireland. I have a long lost cousin. There are lots of Neills that have alcohol running through their veins. I sent 70 barrels to my distant cousin, Johnny Neill, who makes Malabar gin. He's bought an old Neill family brand, which he's reviving, Gelson's old Irish whiskey, and he is maturing a batch in 70 barrels of 2 Paddocks Pinot.
Wow.
Which did 3 or 4 years service for me. I'm getting through these, aren't I? That's good.
Good work. I'm sorry I took so.
The 2 Paddocks Pinot Noir has a delicious flavour. This might be for you. Flavour profile. Does your wine make to a consistent style from year to year, or allow more variation based on crop and grapes available? From Waller. I think it's absolutely the last. All of our wines speak of the year and the place. You know, if you're a big producer, you want consistency from year to year. You want to make the same wine every year. We don't want to do that. Every year is utterly unique, and with the 2 Paddocks, of course, it's easier to get a consistent style because you can blend to more consistency. But really, it's important for me that each one is distinct.
And that's one of the attractions to Pinot Noir as well, isn't it? It's often a snapshot of a vineyard. I mean, that's what Burgundy is.
Absolutely. Karen asks, do you pick grapes by hand? Yes, of course we do. We don't have any machinery there. And in fact, this is another reason why there's so much work that goes into this glass of wine, that not only do we pick our grapes by hand, but every vine is visited by a pair of hands. We estimate 14 times a year on average.
It's significant, isn't it?
It's all handmade, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty stunning
It's pretty extraordinary.
bottle of wine.
I read that Central Otago is ringed by mountains. Does this help your beautiful grape quality? What is your soil type? Mountains, of course. And I think the mountains are mainly made of schist, and a lot of our soil is schist-based. Some of us in Central Otago believe that, you know, if you've ever seen schist, it's kind of sparkles. And we sort of think that vividness you get from Central Otago is something to do with the schist. But who knows? What is your soil type? Well, it's schist and a lot of loess, which is sort of wind-blown soils. Very ancient soils, but they do tend to be, there's very little organic matter in them, and that's why composting and the sort of organic processes that we use are even more
important,
vital.
aren't they?
Yeah.
Do you is it Mike? You do a bit of cultures, is it?
Yes, Mike Wayne.
What about planting crops between the rows as well? Sort of doing that.
Yeah, and
stuff as well.
That's absolutely
help push nitrogen back into the soil and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So just before Christmas, if you walk between our vines, you'll be up to here in something like 3 different crops, and right down to the bottom.
Yeah.
And that all gets mowed and mulched back in and becomes part of that all that fabulous organic activity that's happening.
Do you get involved with that process at all, or are you sort of more try to be hands-on in the winery rather than the the vineyard?
I'm often out in the vineyard, but not at this time of the year because it's very cold.
Are you missing being at home this time of the year?
Yeah, but I find excuses to work in the office at this time of the year because pruning is the worst job in the world. First of all, you get RSI, and it's really, really cold. And
Even with electric shears or the secateurs?
yeah, it's really
Okay.
it's a really boring, cold job.
Okay.
So
Happy to
I
pay someone
kind
to do
of,
it.
make excuses. What other vineyards or wineries do you recommend in New Zealand? Well, many. Favourite New Zealand wines? Well, first of all, I do recommend Escarpment. Larry McKenna, who's known as the godfather of Pinot, or Uncle
Yeah.
Pinot, or what is
Yeah,
Larry's?
Yeah, it is Pinot. It's Pinot Father or something, isn't
Yeah,
it? Something like that.
He has been my mentor and advisor since the beginning, and he comes down to Paddocks 4 times a year, and he wanders around the vineyards with us. He goes into the winery, and he's very involved with Dean and Mike and myself, and has been an absolute godsend. And I owe him a lot. He's a fantastic man, and I love his wines.
And an Australian.
And he's Australian. Yeah. No, there are many New Zealand wines. Our neighbours, Felton Road, our other neighbours, Mount Edward, are wonderful, and Ripon Vineyards. And I also owe them a lot because Rolf Mills was such a great mentor for me.
Yeah.
I could go on, but I'll get boring. If you could serve one dish at your cellar door to pair with Pinots, what would it be? From Will Doggett, Bay of Fires.
Bay of Fires in Tasmania,
Yeah.
of course.
Well, Will, you'd probably agree with me with this. I say this reluctantly because I have 2 great friends on the vineyard. One is a pig, and the other one is a duck. And I would never eat either of them. But I think probably roast duck, just not my particular duck. Yeah, I think of all things, and Pinot works with so many different foods, but duck is just made for it.
Is there a particular producer in the South Island of duck that you would go after specifically?
No, it's usually a mate of mine who shoots them.
Okay, there you
And
go.
it's May. Oh no, duck season's nearly finished. So hopefully he's got a few in the freezer for me when I get back. You have to watch it, the little pellets, you know. Why do you think it's taken so long for winemakers to understand the importance of clean terroir for the future state of soil, Nicola? I'm going to put that over to you, Dom.
Okay. Well, I would probably argue that it's that wine particularly in the New World, has been really treated as more of a commodity than a natural product.
Yeah.
Over the past, say, 50 years. And it's only really now that, the threat of climate change is one facet of it. But, we were talking about soil health before. With education comes knowledge of and understanding of where people sit, and I think it comes down to, it's knowing where they stand in the world. It's knowing and understanding the importance of land health, and then ultimately what's in the bottle at the end. Organic wine as a label hasn't necessarily had the best rap. Maybe the past 15, 20 years, but I think that's changing quite a lot now. I don't know if you agree.
People seek out organic wine.
Yeah,
of course they do. Yeah.
Absolutely. But now it's organic's more seen as being in line with quality rather than
It's
shriveled produce that you might get at the greengrocer or something like that.
It's interesting, they've been making wine in Burgundy for 2,000 years at least, and in the 50s and 60s, quite a lot of producers started to go conventional and spray things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the Burgundians themselves started to realize that it was cheaper and easier to make wine this way, but they weren't actually producing those great Burgundies that they had in the past. And there's been a great return to organics in Burgundy, and that's very, very good to see.
And Champagne is, from what I understand, kind of heading the same way. I mean, you know, for many years they were, you know, more or less littering their vineyards.
Yeah.
And now even the big houses are kind of starting to push for a more sustainable approach.
Yeah.
Because there's, you know, I don't know why it's taken so long for the understanding to come about, but what's important is that it has, and it's starting to. So.
Yeah. Bottom line. How much Riesling do you produce each year? I think it's a total of perhaps 250 cases.
So it's pretty small.
Yeah.
Yep.
We produce a picnic Pinot, and which is slightly higher sugar levels. It's probably 12 grams, and then a 2 Paddocks Riesling, which is dry, about 4 grams.
So which vineyards is Riesling planted in?
That was I planted the Riesling because my ex-wife decided one day, having gone to the trouble of plant three vineyards in Pinot, that she wouldn't drink any more red wine anymore. So I thought I'd plant some white wine, and Riesling was the wine that was a real standout in Central Otago.
It does well in Central Otago, doesn't it?
It does very well.
It's quite unique. I always often find it very, and maybe this comes down to the schist, very sort of minerally, which is a highly debated term.
Right.
But you know, it's not so much the lime citrus kind of characters you might get from the Clare Valley, more sort of river stones and talcum powder and that kind of thing. I don't know if you agree, but
always. I remember Halliday describing one Riesling as saying, imagine. I mean, it's one dimension of Riesling. He said, imagine a whole lemon, and you use the peel, the pith, and the juice, and that's what's in this bottle. And I thought that was, and now I'm always looking for that, you know.
So you're just trying to find the most acidic thing you possibly can.
But also, it counts for quite a lot actually.
Yeah.
So,
I understand. It's a good analogy actually. I haven't heard that one before. So.
Come on, let's have a look at these other ones.
Actually, do you know what?
Are you hot? Oh look,
there are some more. There
from the left.
Sam's going nuts. There we go.
Do you like ceramic eggs? Now, for those that don't know what a ceramic egg is, it's another way of, they're fermenters, and they're made from, and they look like eggs, greatly eggs, and they're made from fired clay. And one of my vineyards is called Red Bank, and it has red clay and yellow clay, and one of my ambitions is to, there's a guy that's making these things, is to dig out my red clay and dig out my yellow clay, and make some ceramic eggs and see what happens. I'm always open to innovation.
Why not?
One of the great things about growing in Central Otago or New Zealand or in the New World is that of course we have immense respect for the old world. That's where all our knowledge, 10,000 years of knowledge about how to make wine comes from Europe. But at the same time, we're not hidebound by restrictions. So it is possible to innovate, and it is possible to, there's a lot of people that are hidebound in different parts of France, and they say We're a little bit jealous because you are permitted, because you're cheating, you know that that's what they'd like to be really doing. Francis Ford Coppola is a great movie person and winemaker. Have your worlds collided? We have shaken hands, and I've drunk his wine, but I don't know if that counts as a collision exactly. Can we come and visit you when the travel bubble gets sorted? Well, we've sort of, we're in two. If you write to Jackie and say who you are, maybe she'll say, come and see us. What we realized was we were wasting a lot of time and staff time with tire kickers. I'm not saying, Ava, that you're a tire kicker, but there were tire kickers who just wanted to come and have a nosy round, look at the pig, and possibly spot the proprietor running like hell behind it for a shelter belter, or swimming in my dam. And they weren't really buying any wine. It was just waste of time. So we're now restricting visitors to our wine club. We have a wine club, and we're happy to see our members. So be sure to join, Ava. When's the best time to visit Otago? Any time of the year. It's actually probably not right now because we've just finished the autumn colours. We're not quite skiing yet. It's a bit cold and shitty, so probably avoid June. Then July, August, September, you can ski. Then you got the spring. So this is probably the only time not to come. Do you inoculate with yeasts, or do you use natural yeasts? All our yeasts are wild. It's whatever's occurring in the winery. And that's one of the things that I find exciting, and why every wine is individual. Dom, I told you about that fly.
I think that's another one. I think they're bred.
You're breeding them.
This is just my my strange hobby.
Yeah. Not everything can be controlled in the wine world. You can make gin and it's completely controllable. To me, that's boring. And also you can use it as hand sanitizer. Have you noticed how all these great gin makers? Not sure if
they had to close their bars and
yeah, they just slapped another label.
It's called diversification.
Yeah. Be that as it may, no, that wildness that comes with things like indigenous yeasts, and the unpredictability of weather. You're in a savage world, and as opposed to cosmopolitan, controlled world.
Yeah.
It's wild, and wild yeasts are part of that.
You're a big fan of the wild world as well. I assume you're very much in your element when you.
Yeah, when I can get away, I go fishing and stuff.
Yeah.
What would your quarantine wine be? You're allowed to say your own. In that case, I will say my own. My quarantine thing has been, if you've followed my. If you follow me on social media, is I like to promote the idea that actually you should drink less in quarantine. And in fact, drink less all around. Just drink less, but drink better wine. Don't slosh wine, you know. Getting drunk is a really pointless thing to do. Drinking too much is a pointless thing to do. But drinking really well and really appreciating what you're drinking, a great bottle of wine, I think is one of the great things in life.
Absolutely, yeah. And you can only appreciate the quality when it's there, really, can't you? So I think that's a lesson that many of us are starting to kind of take on board.
Yeah.
Drink less, drink better. It makes a lot of sense.
I've run out of questions, Stuart.
But
How are we doing for time?
we're actually over, so that's probably quite a fitting end, to be honest.
Anyway,
Those are my questions.
let's see if there are any quick ones.
They're mine. You don't have to read them. You've already heard them. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us tonight. We hope you've had a good time, as enjoyable, as it is. Hopefully, we can get out to bars soon, and we'll be able to do this in person. But for the meantime, this has been quite a lot of fun. So, thanks so much, Sam, for joining us here at Gourmet Traveller Wine. And
thank you, Gourmet Traveller Wine.
And make sure you keep an eye out for 2 paddocks. I believe there might be still a little bit left in the country that you can order. And make sure you keep an eye out for our next tasting. Thanks very much. We'll see you soon. Cheers. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Tom.